You stole the whole show. They're background extras somewhere tonight. In a room you may have already left, people are still talking about you, and none of them are the main character in that conversation anymore. You are. And they know it, even if none of them will say it directly. Here's the thing about rooms. Every room has a hierarchy. Nobody announces out loud. Someone is the center of gravity. And everyone else, whether they admit it or not, is orbiting around that center, adjusting their energy to it, competing for scraps of its attention. For a long time, you weren't that center. You were one of the extras, filling space, playing your assigned part in someone else's scene, waiting for a moment that felt like it belonged to you and never quite arrived. Then something changed. Not overnight, not with an announcement, but the way real shifts always happen, quietly, underneath the surface, until one day you walked into a room and the entire gravity of it rearranged itself around you without anyone voting on it. You didn't demand the spotlight, you didn't perform for it. You simply stopped shrinking to make everyone else comfortable, and the moment you stopped shrinking, the space you'd been leaving empty for other people to fill got occupied by the only person who was ever supposed to be standing there. You. Let's talk about what actually makes someone the main character in a room full of people who all think they deserve that role. It's never volume. Loud people get attention, but attention isn't the same as gravity. You can watch your room and tell immediately who the loudest person is, and it's almost never the one everyone is actually paying attention to underneath the noise. The real center of a room is usually quiet, still unbothered by whether anyone notices them, which, paradoxically, is exactly why everyone notices them. You stop performing for approval. And the second you stopped performing, everyone else's performance became visible for what it always was. Noise, filling space, trying to compensate for something. That's the part that turns people into background extras without them realizing it's happening to them. They're still doing the work of trying to be seen, laughing a little too quickly, agreeing a little too easily, positioning themselves at the center of every story they tell. And it worked for a while because everyone else in the room was doing the same thing, so the competition canceled itself out and nobody looked less impressive than anyone else. Then you showed up, not performing at all. Just present, just fully yourself, without adjusting for the room's expectations. And suddenly, the contrast made every performance around you visible. You didn't make them extras. Their own performing did that. You just stood there being real, and reality has a way of making performance look exactly like what it is. Here's what nobody warned you about becoming the person a room orbits around. It doesn't feel like winning at first. It feels lonely, actually, in a specific way that's hard to explain to people who haven't experienced it. When you stop performing for a room, some people in that room feel exposed by your stillness, and instead of examining why, they quietly resent you for it. Not because you did anything to them, because your presence, without meaning to, holds up a mirror they didn't ask to look into, and people rarely thank the mirror. They usually try to look away from it, or worse, try to crack it, hoping that if they can just get you to react, to perform, to compete on their terms, the discomfort will go away and things can go back to a hierarchy where they're comfortable again. But you didn't crack. That's the part that actually stole the show, if we're being precise about it. Not some dramatic entrance, not some clever line, not some moment engineered for maximum impact. What stole the show was your refusal to compete for a spotlight everyone else was scrambling over. While they were busy jockeying for position, trying to out-talk each other, trying to out-charm each other, trying to prove something to a room that was never actually the audience that mattered, you were simply present, unbothered, taking up exactly the amount of space that was authentically yours. An unbothered presence. In a room full of people performing, reads is magnetic every single time because it's the rarest thing in the room. Let's be honest about something most people won't say out loud. Being an extra in your own story isn't usually forced on you by other people. It's usually something you agree to, quietly, over years, without ever consciously deciding to. You agree to it every time you shrink your opinion to avoid friction. You agree to it every time you laugh at something that wasn't funny because disagreeing felt like too much effort. You agree to it every time you let someone else's story take up more airtime than yours because you convinced yourself your story wasn't as interesting, wasn't as worthy, wasn't as deserving of the room's attention. Nobody hands you the background role. You audition for it repeatedly without realizing that's what you're doing until one day you get tired enough of that role to simply stop showing up for the audition. That's what actually happened to you. You got tired. Not angry, not dramatic, just tired. The quiet exhaustion of someone who spent years making themselves smaller so the room could stay comfortable. And somewhere in that exhaustion, you made a decision that didn't feel like a decision in the moment. You stopped auditioning for the background. You stopped performing agreeableness. You stopped filling silence with reassurance that you weren't a threat to anyone's spotlight. And the second you stopped, the room had no choice but to recalibrate around whoever was left standing there, fully themselves, unwilling to shrink back down to the old size just to keep the peace. Here's what's happening to the people who are now, without realizing it, playing extras in a scene they used to think they were leading. They're doing everything they always did. Same jokes, same energy, same performance that used to work perfectly fine when everyone in the room was competing at the same volume. But it's not landing the way it used to, and they can feel it without being able to name why. It's landing differently because you change the register of the room just by being different inside it. When someone stops needing the room's approval, everyone still chasing that approval suddenly looks like exactly what they are, chasing something. And there's no faster way to become a background character than to be caught visibly wanting the spotlight next to someone who clearly doesn't need it. This is the part that should actually matter to you, more than the satisfaction of watching other people recalibrate around your presence. What you stole wasn't really the show. Shows aren't real. Rooms aren't permanent. What you actually reclaimed was your own attention, the thing you've been handing out for free to everyone else's storylines for years while your own sat neglected in the background. Every time you laughed at a joke that wasn't funny to keep someone comfortable, you were financing their spotlight with your own currency. Every time you softened an opinion to avoid disrupting someone else's narrative, you were donating airtime that should have belonged to your own story. You didn't steal the show from anyone. You simply stopped donating your presence to storylines that were never actually yours to support. And once you stop donating that attention, something strange happens to the people who'd gotten used to receiving it. They don't just lose an audience member. They lose the specific audience member whose attention made their performance feel validated. There's a difference between being watched by everyone and being watched by someone who genuinely sees you, and most people, if they're honest, would trade a room full of casual eyes for one person who actually pays attention with intention. You were that person for a long time for people who never noticed or appreciated it, and the moment you redirected that attention back towards your own life, they felt the absence immediately, even if they couldn't articulate what exactly was missing. Here's the lesson sitting underneath all of this, and it's worth taking seriously instead of just enjoying the momentary satisfaction of feeling like the center of a room. Becoming the main character was never about outperforming anyone else in that room. It was about stopping the performance altogether. Every person who's still playing an extra in their own story is doing so because they're focused on managing everyone else's perception of them instead of focusing on the actual substance of their own life. The moment you shift that focus, the moment you stop asking whether a room approves of you and start simply living as fully yourself regardless of the room's reaction, you don't need to steal anything from anyone. The scene just reorganizes itself around the only person in it who stopped auditioning for a smaller role. So when people say you stole the whole show, understand what actually happened underneath that phrase. You didn't take something from them. You stopped giving something away. You stopped giving away your presence to performances that never deserved it. You stopped giving away your attention to storylines that treated your role as optional. You stopped giving away your voice to rooms that only wanted you agreeable, never fully realized. And the second you reclaimed all of that, the room had no choice but to see you differently, because you'd finally started showing up as the only version of yourself worth watching in the first place. That's not arrogance. That's not some cold indifference to other people's worth. It's simply the natural result of a person who got tired of shrinking and decided, quietly, without any announcement, to take up exactly the space that was always theirs to occupy. Everyone else in the room is still auditioning for a bigger part in a scene that was never actually about them. You stopped auditioning, and the moment you stopped, you realized the scene was always yours. You just spent years handing the lead role to people who never earned it, simply because you were too busy trying to make everyone else comfortable to notice you'd been the main character all along. Let them keep performing. Let them keep competing for a spotlight that was never actually the real currency in the room. You already have what they're chasing, not because you took it from anyone, but because you stopped giving it away. And that, more than any dramatic entrance or clever line or engineered moment, is what actually makes someone impossible to look away from. Not the performance. The complete absence of one. Just a person, fully present, fully themselves, no longer available for a role that was always beneath what they were capable of.